kind of strange that it's all over now. No one's coming to save the day.
Gotham Geek Girl here, and it's time for another review. Super excited to talk about Marvel Studios' latest film, The Thunderbolts. The Marvel Comics team up is a group of anti-heroes and supercriminals caught in a deadly trap by Valentina Allegra de Fontaine and are forced into a dangerous mission that could bring them redemption if they unite as a team. It's crazy. We're already at the 36th film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's directed by Jake Schreier, from a screenplay by Eric Pearson and Joanna Callow, and it stars an ensemble cast featuring Florence Pugh, Sebastian Stan, Wyatt Russell, Olga Kurylenko, Louis Pullman, Geraldine Viswanathan, and David Harbour. Also, Hannah John-Kamen is back, and Julia Louis-Dreyfus. So the film is releasing this Friday. So the ensemble, it's an unconventional team of anti-heroes. We got our beloved Yelena Belova, Bucky Barnes, Red Guardian, Ghost, Taskmaster, and John Walker. After finding themselves ensnared in a death trap set by Valentina Allegra de Fontaine, these disillusioned cast-offs must embark on a dangerous mission that will force them to confront the darkest corners of their past. But will this dysfunctional group tear themselves apart, or find redemption and unite as something much more before it's too late? So I think Marvel is really onto something with this. The movie felt more self-contained. It's very well structured. Surprisingly, narratively, it flowed very well, and it doesn't rely too much on like world building. It doesn't leave you with too many questions about where other superheroes are, because I feel like that's an issue we keep hitting with Marvel lately, whether it be the shows or the movies where people have been. But I think this gives a very specific task for this group of heroes that gives them a real sense of purpose. It carefully explains like why they're right for this job, and they prove themselves worthy of being called heroes, even if they're a little left up. I actually really enjoyed Thunderbolts. I think it's amusing, it's cynical, it's thrilling, and it's a breath of fresh air for the MCU, and it offers a second chance for the group of anti-heroes. And while it offers explosions and like powerful superhuman weapons, it like sets itself apart from Suicide Squad, like the typical like ensemble tropes. It has a much deeper exploration of trauma, mental health, and it gives the unlikely team a sense of purpose. So it's an emotional redemption story. It's really actually naturally funny. A lot of the jokes hit, especially coming from David Harbour. It's full of action, and it showcases like human flawed characters, and it really fleshes out these redeemable anti-heroes. So Marvel Studios first teased that they were going to form a Thunderbolts team with the MCU back in 2021, and there were lots of rewrites, some cast changes, due to like production delays and also like the strikes that we had in 2023, the Hollywood labor disputes. So the film is coming out this Friday, May 2nd, and it's the final film in Phase 5 of the MCU. So let's talk about some required movies and TV shows that I highly recommend you watch beforehand. Obviously, you should have seen Avengers Endgame. I think Ant-Man and the Wasp is pretty important. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, absolutely. And definitely Black Widow. Maybe also even Hawkeye. But first, let's start with who are the Thunderbolts? So, some Marvel Comics fans may know that there's been many team ups of the anti-hero, like supervillain, superhero team appearing in Marvel Comics throughout the decades. The team has consisted of mostly reformed supervillains, originally created by Kurt Busiek and Mark Bagley. The team first appeared in The Incredible Hulk, number 449, back in 1997. So we've seen so many different iterations and team ups, consisting of like different characters, different storylines, like Baron Zemo, who placed his criminal masters of evil in a position of trust by deceiving the authorities and the public, secretly rebranding them as the Thunderbolts. Then we've seen, like throughout the years, we've seen the Thunderbolts also operating from a more like virtuous group, which was led by Hawkeye, Luke Cage, and Bucky Barnes. Bucky has kind of been a leader for the Thunderbolts in many iterations. In 2023, a new group of Thunderbolts written by duo Colin Kelly and Jackson Landing with art by Geraldo Borges. And the team's new lineup was led by Winter Soldier and Valentina Allegra de Fontaine. So it consisted of like espionage-themed superheroes, including Black Widow, Sharon Carter, White Widow, Red Guardian, and U.S. Agent. So the film is going to feature some different members, but I feel like this team up seems to be like the closest iteration, assembling of a super team of all these loose cannons from different corners of the Marvel universe. The Thunderbolts, Marvel's most lethal super team, has evolved numerous times over the years, assembling the unlikely group of reformed villains and like dangerous anti-heroes and like deadly assassins and mercenaries to do the jobs that, like Avengers and the other Marvel heroes won't. I kind of always say it's like the equivalent to DC Suicide Squad. But coming this June, comics fans will be able to experience the new transformation in Thunderbolts by writer Sam Humphries, who's on Uncanny X-Force, and rising artist Ton Lima from West Coast Avengers. So that ongoing series is going to be Bucky Barnes and Black Widow recruiting a new team, and that thrilling new title launches just in time for the Thunderbolts movie. The Winter Soldier and Black Widow recruit this team with a very different team: Carnage, the Hulk, Namor, Clea, and Wolverine. So that's completely different from what we're seeing now, but essentially Thunderbolts are like dangerous loners and the anti-heroes of the Marvel universe, and coming together, nothing would essentially make them work together, but Bucky Barnes and Widow want to give it a shot. In this case, Bucky Barnes and Yelena is the Widow. But back to the film's radical lineup. The group of individuals, they don't really have much in common. They kind of all hate each other, and essentially they all will hold nothing back. It's taking the high octane chaotic energy of the Thunderbolts, and they're known for, crossing wild limits. The crew, they're originally each other's targets. So in the film, they are hired and caught in a deadly trap by Valentina Allegra de Fontaine, and they're forced into a dangerous mission that essentially can bring them redemption, as I mentioned, but only if they work together as a team. So that's pretty much the premise of the film. So Julia Louis-Dreyfus, she returns as Valentina. She's a Contessa, and she is the director of the Central Intelligence Agency, and she brings together the members of the Thunderbolts. So essentially, the film establishes that she's the one who she bought Avengers Tower, which is now referred to as the Watchtower. She bought it from Tony Stark back in Spider-Man Homecoming back in 2017. And Louis-Dreyfus describes Desfontaine as someone who is after power, control, and she generally wants to kick ass in the Marvel universe. But we know she's a control freak, but she's unethical. We saw her in a couple episodes of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which is where Dreyfus made her first appearance. She also appeared in Black Widow. She was in Wakanda Forever. And now she has a much more prominent role in Thunderbolts. She's essentially I would say one of the villains. As a director of the CIA who became interested in recruiting the powerful individuals, DeFontaine personally recruited John Walker, who lost his position as Captain America. So this is tying back to Captain America, Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And Yelena Belova, she offered her a chance to avenge her sister when political tensions arose between the U.S. and Wakanda. So this is in referencing Wakanda Forever, with the U.S. wishing to obtain vibranium for themselves. Of course, the U.S. is greedy. DeFontaine assigned her ex-husband and subordinate Everett Ross. So he strongly opposed any offensive actions against Wakanda. And she recruited him to work with her, but of course, Ross would betray them, and she arrested him for committing treason after she gained evidence of him giving classified intelligence to Wakanda. So back in 2016, in the aftermath of the Avengers Civil War, she purchased Avengers Tower, as I mentioned, from Tony Stark. So she moved all the equipment to the Avengers compound. Now it's the Watchtower. We know she's not to be trusted. In the film, a quote that she says like really stood out to me. She says, "We're brought up with this belief that there are good guys and there are bad guys. But eventually you come to realize that there are bad guys and there are worse guys and nothing else." And that kind of stood out to me because she doesn't really play by the rules, and she can be considered a villain essentially because she's unethical. And it's interesting to point out that she didn't purposely assemble this team. She secretly hired them all to unknowingly kill each other in different assignments. So they all had a hit on each other, and like later realized that like, wait, you're not my assignment, you're my assignment, and they're all trying to kill each other. Then they end up realizing that they were set up to not only hide the evidence, but to eliminate any remaining evidence, which meant them as well. So as they're all about to kill each other, we kind of start to see them realizing they need to team up if they want to survive. So Florence Pugh returns as the beloved mac and cheese loving Yelena Belova. She's a member of the Thunderbolts. We know she was trained in the Red Room as a Black Widow assassin. Pugh has said that the character has been affected by the traumatic events of the MCU projects, including the death of her adoptive sister Natasha Romanoff, rest in peace, Black Widow, whose character died in the film Avengers Endgame 2019. As I mentioned, Hawkeye is kind of a an important watch, I guess, as you see. That's the beginning of her trauma, how she's sad to lose her sister. The Oscar nominee, Florence Pugh, made her debut in Black Widow as Yelena, and now she's headlining her first MCU movie after popping up in Hawkeye. And she really appears to be the standout performance of this movie. She not only proves herself to be a real leader, both in character, but also as a film lead. She carries this movie. The movie opens with Yelena drifting. She's kind of doing some like behind the scenes, like hit for hire work for Fontaine. She's clearly unhappy. She's grieving and she's kind of doing some soul searching. She wants to be in the limelight because she wants to kind of change. She wants to kind of shift to being more of a hero, but we see a lot of depth and self-awareness from Helena, a lot of growth throughout the movie. She gets caught up in Fontaine's like web of lies, and that's how she partners with the very unlikely ensemble. So Yelena, along with Walker, aka U.S. Agent, Taskmaster, and Ghost, they're all trapped in this like super secure zone, and even Ghost can't phase her way through. It's pretty cool. They have like a secure door, and she can't even get through. So along with a surprise patient, the team have to work together if they want to survive. So Hannah John-Kamen is back, as I mentioned, as Ava Starr Ghost. John-Kamen says that the film shows a different side of the character following her introduction in the film Ant-Man and the Wasp. And now Ghost is no longer in a constant state of molecular disequilibrium and able to control her powers with calmness and decisiveness. So I liked seeing that shift of her because now she's more in control. It was really nice to see her character get a lot more camera time, but in a positive light. And we see a lot of her like acrobatics, her abilities in close like hand-to-hand combat. And Wyatt Russell's also back as the egotistical, self-assured, and overzealous patriot John Walker, U.S. agent, a character we so hated in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, the enhanced super soldier and former decorated captain of the U.S. Army Ranger, who will constantly remind you of that he's a veteran. He was chosen by the U.S. government to become Steve Rogers' successor as Captain America before receiving an other than honorable discharge in the miniseries Falcon and the Winter Soldier, where he like beat a guy to death with a shield, which is awesome. But he gets his redemption story. We see a more sympathetic and selfless version, which is very surprising, of this character by the end of the film. So it's great to see the arc of all these characters. Sadly, but one, Olga Kurylenko, she's briefly back as Antonia Dreykov, aka Taskmaster. I would say she's the only character that was shortchanged. They really keep doing this character dirty. She should have had more of an arc. The member with photographic reflexes that allow her to mimic opponents' fighting styles, who was formerly controlled by her father, Dreykov, to complete missions for the Red Room before she was freed by Romanoff back in the Black Widow film. She was highly underutilized. Her powers are freaking amazing. If anything, her powers would have been highly useful. What I will say though is when you see the film, you'll see how the protagonists win, and I guess it kind of makes sense. Tapping into the mental side. We'll get into that in a little bit, but after escaping the trap, the remaining team finally give Alexei, Shostakov, Red Guardian, the super team he's always wanted. David Harbour is adorable. He plays the energetic, lovable Russian super soldier Red Guardian and the counterpart to Captain America, aka the Russian Captain America, and father figure to Belova. So the film further explores the complex relationship between Shostakov and Belova. And that was introduced to Black Widow. And then although like Belova can't really stand him, she still needs someone to help her feel complete. And he's really able to fill that role. We see so much of their like father-daughter dynamic and how they both essentially like really need each other to feel fulfilled, loved, a sense of normalcy and humanity. They really help each other feel like people, not just murderers. And Sebastian Stan also has a much more prominent role than he did in Brave New World, where we learned that Bucky is a congressman. The enhanced super soldier with a cybernetic arm becomes the de facto leader of the Thunderbolts. So he, along with Red Guardian, they come and save the team from a bunch of tanks. While they're like getting assaulted on a drive-by, Bucky swoops in like the Terminator, locked and loaded on a motorcycle, looking badass as ever. I swear to God, he looked like the Terminator. He was so badass. And we don't know much about his work as a congressman, aside from a jab by Fontaine later. She basically says he had like the shortest term ever, like half a term.
Bad things.
Look, I've been where.
And Bucky seems to be most useful when he's a lethal weapon. Of course, when he's in control of his own mind and body. There's a Red Hulk reference as Fontaine is on trial for impeachment. I won't say that Brave New World is a necessary watch, but if you want to get like these little Easter eggs, maybe. But as I mentioned, as a reference, she's on trial for impeachment for her dirty work, but we know she's an excellent schemer. She buys some time. She almost makes her point about there being no reliable heroes and the government having to step in. Wendell Albert Pierce, he portrays a political figure. I think he's a congressman, but he's very by the book, and he's on a quest to expose Fontaine for who she is. And I'll try to keep this spoiler free without giving too much context. But if you are not aware who the main antagonist of the film is, maybe stop watching now because we might sort of hit spoiler territory. So he was already revealed through the casting news and the trailers.
That's just a fairy
The
tale.
trailers suggested that he is a significant villain of the film. So Louis Pullman is Bob Robert, aka Sentry, and the film's villain Void, who was revealed in the trailer. So the superpowered individual, he suffers from amnesia. As the Void, it's a completely different version of Sentry that is completely shrouded in shadows. He's invincible. He spreads darkness, and I'll get into an invincible joke in a little bit, but he spreads darkness and can turn people into shadows. Stephen Yeun was originally cast in the role of Sentry, but he dropped out and was replaced by Louis Pullman. But what I will say is Pullman was excellent. He was very impressive. He did an impressive portrayal as all of the identities, essentially. There were so many touching, heartfelt, and emotional moments, especially between him and Yelena. You sympathize with Bob. You really get to know like his darkest secrets, along with most of the teams. Ideally, through a hand touch, we witness some of the cast's darkest moments and get a glimpse into their hidden trauma, like reliving their darkest secrets and experiences surrounded by death. It gets really dark and bleak at times. This movie is pretty surprising, how dark it can get when it really delves into like depression, and Yelena expresses her feelings of being alone, shrouded in darkness and grief. There's so much grief and sadness, especially trauma of losing Natasha, feeling abandoned. She feels like her dad, Red Guardian, wasn't really there for her. She felt alone, also reflecting on her childhood, and the abusive Red Room comes back to haunt her. Meeting Bob also foreshadows the void as she tells him to push down the darkness and loneliness. And we really see these characters struggle with feelings of purpose and fulfillment. That's pretty much like the main theme of the film, having a purpose. After so much murder and embarrassment and like making mistakes, they truly feel a longing for just having an impact, just having a significant impact, having any relevancy of feeling important.
We all have things that we regret.
What's the point in anything? There's so many questions about what's the point in life. Walker's ashamed, embarrassed, being the fall of a hero. The team's constantly described as being a liability. Back to Walker, he's called the dime store cap. They're all called disposable delinquents. But I will say it's not all dark. Some of the jokes are freaking hilarious, especially David Harbour. All the inside jokes and like the witty like one-liners, like the Fontaine saying like junior varsity cap and old Santa. The scene I originally saw this when I was at CinemaCon. It was hilarious and action packed. And this might still honestly be the best scene for me still. So it's full of witty one-liners, especially from Julia Louis-Dreyfus, aka Valentina. The extended scenes, it opened with Harbour, Red Guardian, telling Bucky that we're the same, we are different, before revealing the rest of the unconventional team of antiheroes. There's a lot of funny jokes and banter. Yelena Belova, Ghost, and Taskmaster and John Walker, they're in the back of the van. Then the team enter the Watchtower skyscraper, formerly Avengers Tower, as I mentioned. And the next scene shows Valentina poking fun at Congressman Barnes and his promising career of less than half a term. Yikes. And she also calls John Walker a JV varsity Captain America. She tells Yelena, "You look awful. You sure you're ready?" And Yelena responds, "Eat shit, Valentina." It's so funny. The comedic moments are great. The comedic timing is great. It feels natural. Then, as I mentioned, it gets a little serious with Yelena adding that the Avengers are gone. You know, who's going to save the day? But we could be the people that are coming. Not heroes, but not giving up.
Coming.
Bucky, you have the wrong people. We have all done bad things.
And I mentioned it all started with Valentina trying to get rid of evidence. It was her failed Sentry project. But her test subject, Bob, survived the procedure. And Bob was told at this cutting edge, like human improvement technology trial, that it would help people. That it would help people make something better of themselves. And the Void, as I mentioned, is the dark, evil side of the character, Robert Reynolds, a Sentry, and he cannot be contained. He's a monster. He's literally just like disappearing people. It's almost like a snap. Almost like everyone just like disappearing, but he's invincible and all powerful, stronger than all the Avengers rolled into one. That's what Allegra tells him as she's manipulating him, and he starts to believe that he's a god and more powerful than a god. And she manipulates his potential. She brands him as Earth's mightiest hero. She even changes his hair to blonde. In the comics, Sentry was originally, as I mentioned, Robert Bob Reynolds, who suffers from a crippling addiction, and he drank the Golden Sentry serum to become very powerful, gaining matter and energy manipulation abilities in the process. So during his crime-fighting career, Sentry was a part of a bunch of civil groups, such as the Dark Avengers, Mighty Avengers, New Avengers, the Horsemen of Death. So I wonder how they're going to continue this character. But Sentry was also bonded with a dark and powerful entity, as I mentioned, the Void, which when he consumed the serum. So the entity acts as a counterforce and embodiment of all of Bob's negative aspects. And boy, is Bob depressed. The Void literally feeds off his depression, his sadness, his anger, and all the negative trauma he faced. And man, this movie like really explores manipulation and depression and trauma and grief in a way that we don't typically see from Marvel, especially as of late. I'm happy they're getting back into like more adult themes and, you know, repercussions. There's great action, hilarious fight moments as well, like slapping Bucky with his own arm, crushing Walker's shield into a taco. It's funny. And we do see Snyder, I'm going to say it, we do see Zack Snyder's cinematic fight influences, especially in the Sentry fight scenes. It's very Injustice, like Man of Steel BVS. His suit looks great. The fights are super entertaining and well balanced. But the CGI, man, what is up with Marvel? Why do they continue to have such poor CGI and cut corners? Some of the scenes just come off very green screen to me, especially some of the Sentry scenes. Yelena kind of doing some like parkour part in an office. It was a quick scene, but it just looks like she's flying through images. Aside from the bad CGI, my minor complaints are, as I mentioned, Taskmaster was completely wasted. She's such a dope character. Some of the moments felt very like the damage control moments, like felt out of place tonally, like they were kind of too inspired by the boys, but that's small. Overall, the depiction of grief, depression, and trauma explored through the interconnected mental health shame rooms and the level of trauma and emptiness was a tearjerker. I'm not going to front. I might have teared a little bit. But working as a team through the trauma was literally the only way to stop the Void and only something that they can do. The unlikely team up, as Bucky said, we got to do something or live with it forever. And they proved themselves worthy of heroes. Instead of doing nothing, they took a chance. And the film, as I mentioned, the look at mental health, it gives this unlikely team a real sense of purpose. It sets itself apart from unconventional team tropes, as I mentioned, like Suicide Squad, which I like. But I'm just saying this movie's not relying on just the kills or weapons or jokes. The self-contained Thunderbolts made sense. It was definitely a different kind of superhero movie, and I think that's why it works. Have you seen it? Let me know your thoughts. The film is on theaters on Friday. Let me know.
Marvel Studios' Thunderbolts.
Under pressure.